Hi, I'm Scott Harris, Executive Director of the University of Mary Washington Museums in Fredericksburg, Virginia. During the COVID-19 emergency, we're going to be sharing some short videos each week about Gari Melchers' home and studio and the James Monroe Museum. We're calling them a Melchers Minute and a Monroe Minute. Though, full disclosure, especially since Mr. Melchers is looking over my shoulder here, some of these programs, like this one, will be a bit longer than 1 minute. Our first Melchers Minute concerns the topic that's on everybody's mind today, virus epidemics and pandemics. An epidemic is an event in which a disease is actively spreading, while pandemic refers to a disease that has gone geographically over a wide area, perhaps an entire country or the whole world. And that's the situation that Gari and Corinne Melchers were confronting in 1918 with the influenza pandemic that was occurring worldwide. Now, they had moved in 1916 to Falmouth, Virginia, which is across the Rappahannock River from Fredericksburg, and purchased the historic Belmont estate. They had a very tranquil lifestyle there, but the events of 1918 and 1919 started to pose an outside threat to that idyllic existence that they had. It's called the Spanish flu popularly, but in fact, no one's quite sure where the disease originated. There are several theories, but there's no question that its impact on the world was devastating. From January 1918 to August 1919, the influenza infected 500 million people, about a third of the population of the world at that time. It killed over 50 million worldwide, including 675,000 deaths in the United States alone. The first recorded mention of the pandemic that we have by Gari Melchers comes in October of 1918 when he's in New York City on business. He's writing to Corinne in a letter dated October 2nd, 1918. Very short passage. How are you? I hope the influenza is not getting worse in Falmouth and Fredericksburg. So it was already an established fact in the country, and the fact that he makes such a brief mention indicates that it's a topic that they've already been quite aware of. He does go, though, into greater detail 2 days later in a letter that he wrote saying, the influenza is very bad in this town. From your letter saying the disease was raging, I'm afraid it's pretty bad, and I'm concerned about you. Here it exists bad enough, but considering the size of New York, it is still comparatively small, but of course may get worse very soon. Well, let us hope for the best. Now, Gary's apparently trying to downplay the danger of the influenza in New York where he is, maybe to reassure his wife who's far away in Virginia. Ironically, though, at the time he's writing, the disease was reaching its peak in New York. According to the 1918 annual report of the New York City Department of Health, during the 2 weeks between October 5th and October 19th, exactly when Gari is writing, influenza deaths mounted until they crested around October 21st. So as he's trying to downplay the danger, he's actually writing in the period where it was at its worst. However, in retrospect, he wasn't entirely wrong with respect to the impact of the virus and the death rate it had in New York overall. New York was a big city then as it is now, had 5.6 million people, and they recorded 30,000 deaths from the influenza over the 2-year period. That's a horrible number to have to deal with, but it was a smaller death rate than smaller populated cities like Boston and Philadelphia. So in a sense, Gari was right by his perspective that New York was so big that it could sort of absorb the virus deaths and keep going. But it was still a definite tragedy, and it was not confined just to that area. It was happening all over the world. Now, New York took some very active measures to try and stem the problems from the epidemic. They quarantined, they used temporary medical facilities, and they had a massive public information campaign that persuaded New Yorkers to cover their coughs and sneezes, to stop spitting, must have been interesting to approach that topic, and to practice what we now call social distancing. Corinne Melchers may not have been fully comforted by her husband's reports from New York, as reassuring as he tried to make them. We know this, or at least we surmise it, because in a letter that he sent her dated October 15th, 1918, he acknowledged the gauze mask that he received from her. So she's obviously concerned enough about his health to send him some protective gear. We don't know whether he wore it. We hope that he did. Her concern was no doubt heightened by the impact that the influenza pandemic was having in the Fredericksburg region. In 1918, Spotsylvania County recorded 32 deaths from the influenza, while Stafford County, of which Falmouth is a part, had 14. And in the city of Fredericksburg itself, right in between these two, there were 33 fatalities recorded from this outbreak. Both Gary and Corinne Melchers, though, throughout this period, seemed determined not to let the influenza alter their established routines of their lives. Gary continued bringing clients to his studios, both in New York and at the couple's home. He visited his clubs. He traveled extensively. He went to many a party. Corinne Melchers also was in a party mood. She held an annual Easter party for children in the Fredericksburg-Falmouth area every year, and she did so in 1918 and 1919. She entertained many house guests during this time. She traveled as well as her husband and all of her friends did. So in many ways, from our vantage point, the couple's reaction to this threat seems perhaps cavalier, maybe dangerously so. It's true that none of their family members or close associates succumbed to the illness, but one wonders whether they were tempting fate by trying to not alter their lifestyles. And so we're living in our own time with our own virus emergency, and we can look back on the lessons learned from 1918 as well as other outbreaks and perhaps apply some of those lessons. Human society, though, has withstood loss and adversity before from things like this, and if they can help us learn in our own time, I think that that's one of the benefits of looking at the past for guidance in situations like this. We are all in this together. We can get through together, and we can look to the past to learn some of the ways that might help us do so. For more on the life and times of Gari and Corinne Melchers, we encourage you to visit our website, www.garymelchers.org. Go to our YouTube channel to look for archived programs and lectures, and follow us on social media. Thank you for watching this Melchers Minute.